Kaboom?
Yes, Rico. Kaboom.
My last video was about Descendants, and if you're involved in that fandom in any way, then you're probably also at least somewhat familiar with Ever After High. The beef between these two fandoms is legendary. I'm a fan of both, but not everyone is. They're constantly being pegged against each other even to this day, and it's not hard to see why. The facts of exactly what went down are probably going to be lost forever. We may never know if Descendants was indeed a ripoff of Ever After High, but regardless of how it started, it's pretty universally agreed upon that Descendants was the reason Ever After High ended, and also probably the reason it's never coming back. But Monster High, Ever After High's sister series, has been rebooted multiple times over already, so that hasn't stopped Ever After High fans from hoping a reboot might still be in the cards. So for today's video, I wanted to explore what a reboot might look like if it were done in such a way that Mattel wouldn't run into issues with Disney again. But before we get into that, I need to do a quick breakdown of the Descendants Ever After High controversy, just so everyone is on the same page. So the story actually starts in 1996, when Mattel signed an exclusive contract with Disney to make and distribute dolls for their new Disney Princess line. The history of the Disney Princess line is, in and of itself, an interesting story, and if you want to learn more about it, I recommend these videos. But all you need to know right now is that this contract came at a time when both Disney and Mattel were struggling financially, and turned out to be a huge success and a saving grace for both companies. Mattel, at the time, was suffering from low Barbie sales, and launched some new toy lines hoping to tap into new markets. One of these was the Monster High toy line, which was probably initially created to be more of a competition for Brats. The Monster High dolls had a different face mold than the typical Barbie, were dressed in more fashionable styles with lots of accessories, and featured things like heavy makeup and colored hair. Their backstory was that they were the daughters of famous monsters attending a high school together to learn how to become proper monsters themselves when they grow up. The premise worked really well, and the franchise was a huge success. By 2012, Monster High had become the second best-selling doll franchise, worth multi-millions, and second only to Barbie. So, naturally, Mattel wanted to capitalize on that success. They drew up plans for a couple of spin-off lines, including a mythological high, an alien high, and a fairy tale high, better known as Ever After High, which was about the children of fairy tale characters attending a high school together. Ever After High premiered in July of 2013, alongside the first wave of dolls, which featured Raven, Apple, Briar, and Maddie in their premiere outfits. The dolls were accompanied by tie-in books and a web series. Almost immediately, there was confusion with consumers, who erroneously believed the Ever After High line was an official Disney franchise, alongside the Disney Princess dolls. Disney was not happy. Officially, Mattel had every right to use characters like Snow White, Cinderella, and Briar Rose, who are in the public domain. But the relationship between Mattel and Disney was already rocky at this point. Mattel had been facing criticisms for the design of the Disney Princess dolls looking more similar to Barbie than they did to the princesses, and the quality of all of their dolls had been declining for years. And unfortunately, the contract Disney had with Mattel was about to expire. In 2014, Disney opted not to renew their exclusive contract with Mattel, and took the Disney Princess dolls to Hasbro, Mattel's largest competitor, instead. In July of 2015, the DCOM Descendants premiered, which was about the children of Disney characters attending high school together, with tie-in books and dolls being sold as well. It didn't take long for Ever After High fans to call ripoff, but the truth is a little bit more complicated than that. Ever After High premiered in July of 2013, and the first official Descendants concept art we have is from 2012, which makes sense considering how long movie production takes. Now, personally, I do think Disney copied Ever After High. Remember that Disney and Mattel had a working relationship at the time. I'm not sure how long it takes for something like a doll line to go from idea to reality, but it's not outside the realm of possibility for Disney to have learned about Ever After High while it was still in its conceptual or production phase, and immediately got to work making their own version. Even if they didn't know all of the details, even if they just heard it was going to be a fairy tale version of Monster High, that alone would give them enough information to realize that their iconic characters might be involved. But this is all speculation. There's no proof of any of this, and I doubt there ever will be. In 2016, Ever After High officially ended, without a proper finale. There are a lot of overlapping reasons why Ever After High was cancelled. I quite enjoyed this video, which goes into detail about all of them. But there's no doubt that Disney was a major reason. The loss of the Disney Princess line was a big deal for Mattel, and the competition was making it far too expensive to justify keeping Ever After High going. In 2022, Mattel and Disney resumed their exclusive contract, and if it's not already explicitly outlined in that contract, it's nevertheless understood that Mattel will not be trying their luck with their own princess dolls again anytime soon. So, with all of that in mind, how could a reboot even be possible? It's the overall consensus that Ever After High will never be rebooted. At the very least, it's almost certainly not going to be rebooted while Descendants is ongoing, and Disney appears to be milking that franchise for all it's worth. But if it ever were rebooted, it would almost certainly need a massive refresh to avoid pissing off Disney again, and that's what I want to explore. In order to make this work, Ever After High would need to be rebooted without any characters that would compete with the Disney Princess or Descendants franchises. That means that all of these characters would need to be cut. Now, it needs to be said that I don't necessarily think this is a fair arrangement. I know there are going to be people who are like, a version of Ever After High without Raven and Apple isn't really Ever After High. And you're not wrong. There's definitely a conversation to be had about the way Disney tries to monopolize the characters they use. But for the purposes of this video, we're going to explore the concept anyway and see if we can make it work. Now, with that said, there is a question of exactly how far we need to go. Do we have to cut any Ever After High character that also appeared in a Disney movie? Because if that were the case, then we would also need to get rid of all of these characters, in addition to the ones we've already cut. But personally, I don't think that's necessary. I mean, this entire video is speculative. I've already said that I don't think Ever After High is ever going to be rebooted, even if it did take these precautionary measures. But for the purposes of this video, in order to make Ever After High quote-unquote safe from Disney's pushback, I think the two heavy hitters we need to avoid are the Disney princesses and Descendants. Everything else is probably safe. Take Cedar Wood, for example. Cedar is the daughter of Pinocchio, who is a Disney character, but she's not in competition for a Disney princess doll or a major Descendants character. I could understand why it might be confusing for the consumer to be in the Mattel aisle at the toy store and see an officially licensed Disney Snow White doll on one shelf and a Snow White's daughter doll on the next shelf over. But that's not going to happen with Pinocchio. I'm sure there are Pinocchio toys and merch being sold by Disney somewhere, but it's nowhere near the scale of the Disney princess dolls. So I'd venture to say that she's probably a safe character for Mattel to explore without worrying too much about pushback from Disney. The thing we really need to be conscious of is the Disney Princess line. That's the big moneymaker for both Disney and Mattel. The loss of that revenue is what caused Ever After High to be cancelled in the first place, so it's going to need to be protected going forward. But with all of that in mind, the main characters we have left, without the ones who overlap with Disney, is still looking a little sparse. Not a lot to work with, so we'll need to pad that out. But before we do that, we have to determine who our two main protagonists are going to be. In the original Ever After High, the main driving factor for the plot was that Raven Queen did not want to fulfill her destiny and become the next evil queen, a decision that puts Applewhite's destined happily ever after as the next Snow White at risk. So, in a reboot, we would want to replicate that central conflict. But how do we do that with the characters we had left? My initial idea was to make Lizzie our main character, but there were a few problems with that. The first is that Lizzie has an equivalent in Descendants, and I considered circumventing that by making her the daughter of the Red or White Queen instead. But even with that change, I felt like her story would still be too similar to Red's from Descendants. Additionally, in the original Ever After High, Lizzie was actually a royal, which is to say that she was never rejecting her destiny. And to put the nail in the coffin, although Lizzie is one of my favorite characters, she doesn't have a good foil the way Raven does. There's no good candidate to be her Applewhite. The rest of the quote-unquote villains left on my list had similar problems, with the exception of Ramona Badwolf. I always really liked Cerise and Ramona's story in Ever After High, and I was really disappointed that the show was cancelled before I got a chance to properly explore the implications of it. But most importantly, Little Red Riding Hood has never been done by Disney before, and Ramona and Cerise properly foil each other in a way that is similar to Raven and Apple. So for that reason, I've decided to make them the new central protagonists. And that might come as a surprise, considering Ramona is only introduced in the last season of Ever After High, but hear me out. The story would center Cerise and Ramona after Cerise refuses to sign the Book of Legends. You might be saying, wait, it's Cerise who refuses to sign? Why not Ramona? Well, I obviously did consider that, but I thought since we're already changing things so much, why not change the formula a little? I felt like making Cerise the one who refuses to sign the book would make the story have a central theme of sisterhood. Cerise doesn't want to sign because she doesn't want her sister to get hurt, and Ramona wants to sign because she doesn't want her sister's happily ever after to be jeopardized. Both are trying to protect their sister, only in different ways. And the fact that they are sisters is still a secret, at least at first. So nobody but Ramona understands why Cerise is rebelling. I imagine it would start off similar to how Raven and Apple started off. After Cerise refuses to sign the book, Ramona convinces Headmaster Grimm to let them become roommates, under the guise that she will convince Cerise to follow her destiny. And this is true. Ramona does want Cerise to follow her destiny, but it's more so an excuse for the two sisters to finally spend time with each other out in the open in public. And the more time they spend together, the closer their bond becomes, and the more convinced they each become about their stance. Ramona will do anything to ensure her little sister gets her happily ever after, but Cerise only becomes more certain of her rebellion. Speaking of rebels, in drafting this reboot, I also had some ideas on how to fix the Royals versus Rebels shtick we saw in the original. I don't think the students splitting into factions in and of itself is a bad idea, but the labels Rebel and especially Royal definitely got pretty confusing after a while, considering there are characters who are royalty but still refusing their destiny, and there are also characters who embrace their destiny but are not royalty. Thankfully, this is a simple fix. We just changed the wording. Rebels versus Destined, or Rebels versus Legends, for example. But more conceptually, I do think the Rebels should be more of an underground movement. Perhaps they meet in the woods or under the school to try to find a way to break or change their destinies. Aside from the two sisters, the other main characters that are safe to include are Maddie Hatter, Kitty Cheshire, Blondylocks, Cupid, Cedarwood, Sparrow Hood, and all three charming siblings. I also like the idea of making Hunter a central character, since he's also featured in the Little Red Riding Hood story alongside Cerise and Ramona. Since we're not bringing back Ashlyn Ella, his romance will need to happen with a different princess, and unfortunately, I don't have many left. I could put him with one of the 12 dancing princesses, or add a new princess like the Princess in the Pea or the Goose Girl princess. Or we could put him with a character who is not a princess at all, but I think that takes away something from his story. So I ultimately decided to make a new character for him, Odetta White, the daughter of the White Swan Princess. she would stand opposite Duchess, daughter of the Black Swan. And while waiting around for her prince to come find her and rescue her from being turned into a swan forever, she secretly meets up with and falls in love with Hunter. Cerise, as our new central protagonist, would be best friends with Maddie and Hunter, and eventually befriend many of the other main characters as well. Ramona, as a quote-unquote villain who's actually pursuing her destiny, would be friends with Duchess, and would start off somewhat reluctant to get too emotionally involved with the other main characters, oftentimes playing into the villain attributes that people expect of her. Ideally, I would put her with Lizzie as well, but since Lizzie now has a Descendants counterpart, I'll have to go with that. Which brings me to my next point. Is there any room to include the characters from the original in a way that's Disney safe? I mean, we've had to cut a lot of characters, and many of them are beloved. Fans would be devastated that they're not coming back. But the whole idea of this concept is to create a version of Ever After High that won't step on Disney's toes. So, does that mean that those beloved characters are gone forever? In short, I don't think so. I think there can be a way for us to incorporate them, just as long as those characters are not made into dolls. That means that they cannot be a major character, but cameos and maybe even minor characters could potentially be safe. Not to mention the franchise that will not be named, but I'm imagining something like this Snow White cameo in the original Descendants movie. It's nothing huge, just a little something to acknowledge the character. I mean, theoretically, it is kind of far-fetched that all of the most famous fairy tale characters would all be the exact same age at the exact same time. I know that this is a cartoon about fairy tales, so it doesn't actually need to be realistic, but for the sake of the story and appeasing old fans, we could easily explain away the absence of characters like Briar Rose and Rosabella by saying that they're considerably older or younger than our main characters. But they could still be included in small ways. Maybe while the characters are on an adventure, they come across Briar while she's sleeping. Or, like maybe the evil stepsisters are students and reoccurring characters, but their sister, Ashlyn Ella, is a few years older and already graduated, or a few years younger and hasn't started high school yet. And in one episode, we get to see her for a little bit. Again, nothing huge, but just to give the fans something. But with all of that said, I do have something special cooked up for our former protagonists, Raven and Apple. My idea goes like this. After Cerise refuses to sign the book, she learns of one mysterious figure in history who reportedly did not fulfill her destiny. Over the course of the series, the rebels learn the full story. Once upon a time, the magic in their world was fading. A great sorceress cast a spell to learn why, and discovered that their world was a manifestation of the beliefs of our world. As our world modernized, theirs lost magic. To combat this, the great sorceress paired up with the Brothers Grimm to create the Storybook of Legends and the Destiny Cycle, to ensure their stories would keep being told, and the magic in their world would survive. But in doing so, she doomed her daughter, Raven, to a cruel fate. Raven was the first and only to refuse to sign the book. Her counterpart, Apple White, still had her destiny happen, albeit accidentally, and nobody knows what happened to Raven. I concocted this backstory because I wanted to pay homage to how important Raven and Apple were to the formation of Ever After High as a franchise, but also because I wanted to clarify a few question marks I had about the original series. In the original, when Raven refuses to sign the Storybook of Legends, Headmaster Grimm, Apple, and the rest of the school acts like Raven is putting her and everyone else's lives at stake. But at the same time, nobody really knows what will happen and if there even are consequences to not signing the book, because, judging by the rest of the series, it seems like there aren't. So, in my version, the consequences are clear. By refusing to sign the book, Cerise is risking their world losing magic, and our world losing its sense of hope and belief. From there, the story can branch off in many different ways. Perhaps, like in the original, Cerise would eventually destroy the book. They never properly explain this in the original, but I think most of the fandom agrees that this event is meant to represent the characters being free to choose their own destinies. But that's not the only option. Maybe instead, magic will be drained from their world and they'll have to learn to live without it. Personally, I like the idea of their destinies being unavoidable, with or without the book. I like the tragedy of your destiny coming to you via the path you take to try to avoid it, like Darian realizing he was always meant to become the Beast, or Apple realizing that she was always meant to have a Princess Charming. But I know that's not how everyone interprets those scenes, and not how everyone would want the story to end. Before I wrap up, here's a list of other minor characters from Ever After High that I haven't mentioned already that are Disney safe and could be upgraded to major characters. And here's a list of fairy tales we've never seen featured that could be included. Personally, I'm a huge fan of fairy tales, and I think making the Rebels more of an underground movement presents us with a unique opportunity to explore lesser-known fairy tales. Perhaps because they aren't as well known and their destinies are more ambiguous, they might be more inclined to join this kind of movement in the down low. I also think there's room to include things like Greek and Arthurian myths. I know there were plans at one point to do a mythological high, which would be where Cupid is originally from, but it seems like that idea is pretty dead in the water, so maybe we could revive it a bit with this reboot. Morgana Le Fay might make an interesting character to include, because she's both a hero and a villain, depending on the particular Arthur story you're telling. I'd also love to include more ballet characters besides just Duchess. I've already mentioned the Swan Princess, but we could also include Clara or the Sugar Plum Princess from the Nutcracker, or Giselle. But that could just be bias talking because, lore drop, I am an amateur ballerina myself. Other than that, I don't have any more concrete ideas. I'll say the same thing I said in my G6 My Little Pony video, which is that the world building is the kind of thing that I don't think needs to be super detailed at this stage, because, theoretically, it's the kind of thing that would be fleshed out over time as the show continued. But if you have any additional ideas you'd like to throw into the mix, I'd love to hear them down in the comments. I'd also love to hear what you think of the ideas I've presented. Do you think something like this could work as an Ever After High reboot? Would you prefer if Ever After High is only rebooted if it can be done with Raven and Apple? I want to hear all of the opinions. But that's all that I have for you today. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. I'll see you next time, and until then, don't forget to smile and wave.
Whoa, hey now!